not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Why are we afraid to talk about death? It is, without question, one of the greatest taboos in American culture. I imagine some of you are saying, Silver, you preaching pigeon, we show death off all the time. But there's a big difference between talking about death and exploiting it. And we Americans love to exploit death, shamelessly. When a celebrity dies, the news media has coverage for the next week. Social media explodes. We love to talk about the life that has passed with the minimum amount of investment. And there's a prevalence of death in entertainment because death is a fantastic vehicle for drama. It's one thing to have the hero at odds with the villain over the sake of the world, but it's not personal until the villain hurts someone close.
And there's one other person you pissed off. His name was Phil.
A young protagonist isn't truly the vulnerable underdog until at least one parent is dead. Disney has made a whole franchise with this idea to the point where we expect it. And comic books are perhaps the worst offenders of all. Death in comics has become an inconvenience.
You know how this works. In a few months, a magic amulet will bring him back, or we'll find some alternate dimension Green Arrow that's exactly like the one we had before. How many of you here have already died? Come on, put him up!
We love to use death, but we're terrified to ask what it really means for the dead and for those who live on.
Is this the first time you lost a soldier?
We are not soldiers.
My very first moment with Dr. Wolf was a discussion on how bronies write stories of the main six coping with loss or facing the end of their own lives. That somehow these characters become a vector by which the fans can explore questions about life and death. And despite my overall criticisms, there are some stellar examples of dealing with the grieving process in entertainment. The Lion King showed Simba spending years in denial only to turn around and face his fear. But to borrow a criticism from the nostalgia critic, the movie couldn't end without him being absolved of responsibility. A better example is Up, which managed to create a rapport with its audience and really make you feel the pain of loss with barely any dialogue. The whole movie is a man finding a way to deal with the pain and opening himself up to living once again. When Captain America died, Wolverine of all characters offered one of the best descriptions of grief that I'd ever read. Even Big Hero 6, at its heart, was a story about a boy working through grief by focusing on a passion. And it is so important to let kids know that it's okay to face this pain and work through it. To quote a wartime expert, Sophia Elfaz, children are best fortified for the uncertainty of life when we are honest with them than when we pretend a safety that is unreal. And yet to this day, we might show them, but immediately we dial it back to. So here comes Tanks for the Memories, an episode that many feared would spell Tank's death. And it didn't. But consider all the dialogue when Rainbow is talking about hibernation.
I will keep you by my side, so I will not be alone. So I'll be the one who doesn't have to say goodbye. I don't want him to go. Oh, Tank, I'm sure gonna miss you.
The writers found a way to talk about the grieving process without actually killing a character off. I'm not entirely sure if this strengthens or weakens the message, but it is a brilliant way to work around the cultural fear of talking about death. And it all starts with denial.
Come on! Tortoises don't hibernate! Some pony put that picture in there as a joke. What would you know? You're a dragon! Don't say that word!
It's not just wanting to reject what's happening and insisting that the world is wrong. Denial can also be a sense of numbness, like an emotional center in our brains blew a fuse, and we just can't feel anything. But there's one emotion that often arises faster than any other: anger.
Who said anything about anger? I didn't say anything about anger! I'm not upset, and I am not angry! Do I look angry?
Sometimes people become more irritable or short-tempered. Maybe we blame the world, other people, God, ourselves, and the dead. Oftentimes we think we have to hold that anger inside, turning it into guilt. I wonder if we've become so sensitive to being polite and correct that we've forgotten it's okay to say, I'm mad. And it's okay to express that anger. Case in point, in 2010 on the video game website The Escapist, freelancer John Carr published an article on how playing Left 4 Dead allowed him to work out feelings of pain and anger at the death of his parents. He couldn't put it into words, so he coped with the real-life loss by taking it out on a fictional horror. Anger might still be an issue going into the third phase, bargaining, and I can sum this up with just one sentence. If I gather the 7 Dragon Balls, I can bring you back to life. This is the idea that if we work hard enough, do just the right things, or be awesome enough, we can somehow undo what's happening. Rainbow's bargaining takes 2 forms. The first is an insistence that Tank can get over his decline.
All you need is some hard work to get the old blood pumping.
The second being her idea that she can make this stop by postponing winter. To me, this desperation puts a different spin on her industrial sabotage. Rather than this being Rainbow doing something stupid for her own desires, it's an allegory. She's trying to reverse the seasons and turn back time, much the same way we wish we could go back to before our loved ones died. And when the season presses forward in spite of her wishes, that's a hard slap from reality. And so Rainbow becomes depressed, lethargic, distant, reserved. Her friends don't do so great a job when it comes to coping, even Fluttershy. The thing about depression from a loss is that it's not the same as medically diagnosed depression. Rainbow needed time to sit with her grief and explore it. This is probably the weakest representation because it's trying to hurry through a phase that shouldn't be rushed. Fluttershy gave Rainbow a needed push, but I'm afraid the 22-minute format works against this episode. Best thing to take away from this is that it's okay to cry.
Strong men also cry. Strong men also cry.
Yeah, just not like that. And after she's traveled through her grief, Rainbow finally accepts that she has to say goodbye. And what a great image here, with Tank equally peaceful about his end. So we counterbalance my criticism of Rainbow's rushed depression with an excellent example of acceptance. Rainbow helps him settle in and says her goodbye, but we're not told that she's suddenly better. She still needs to do something in honor of her friend, because acceptance isn't a cure. Remember that Wolverine moment I mentioned? Here's the excerpt. It's like somebody shot a cannonball right through your stomach, leaving a great big hole. Eventually it starts to close up from the outside in, and one day it'll be different. The load won't feel as heavy. Then you'll hear a song, or somebody will laugh, or the wind will blow the wrong way, and the hole will tear wide open again. Believe it or not, it heals back faster after each time. A death isn't like losing a job or getting divorced. You don't get over it. You have to integrate it into your life. Learn to live with it. But life does get better. Wolverine is currently dead in the comic. Anyone want to take bets on how long that will last? Because that's the undermining issue with Tank's hibernation. This death isn't permanent. He'll be back in the spring, and I'd wager we'll see him in the show again before the season's half over. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? I honestly can't say because it's going to vary from person to person. Yes, I like it when stories are willing to treat a young audience with respect and trust their ability to learn, but I also don't want a story to drive a kid to this. So all I can say with certainty is that I'm impressed the writers used an analogy between hibernation and death to explore the grieving process. A story for kids to fall back on when they feel their own loss. An example of how people can react when faced with something they can't control. And a vehicle for parents to use as a bridge to help their children connect with larger issues. This episode isn't a flawless presentation, but it is an impressive feat overall. And that's part of the reason I enjoyed this show. I'm Silver-Quill, and if you've had to face a loss, I hope you know that, as terrible as it may feel, no one is truly alone, especially in grief. Thanks for watching.